An executive order signed by President Donald Trump Monday talks about missile defense. But is it the one that's being talked about for Fort Drum? 7 News reporter Lexi Bruning went looking for clarity today and learned others are looking for it too.
I would imagine that everyone at this point is still trying to figure out kind of the details, as it trickles down to the members of Congress of what the actual intent is.
There's a lot of questions surrounding an executive order signed by President Donald Trump Monday night.
To immediately begin the construction of a state-of-the-art Iron Dome missile defense shield, which will be able to protect Americans. We protect other countries, but we don't protect ourselves.
The order gives Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth 60 days to develop a plan for the Iron Dome. The Iron Dome has been used in Israel and essentially tracks enemy rockets and launches missiles to intercept the enemy. With the announcement, local officials are wondering if this executive order relates to a potential missile defense site at Fort Drum.
I'm not sure that those two relate to each other, which is why I reached out to Congresswoman Tenney's office to kind of see what the relationship was between the presidential's initiative on Iron Dome and what the current initiative is with missile defense, and see how those two relate.
In December, the National Defense Authorization Act passed in the House of Representatives, and in it, a requirement that an East Coast missile defense site be constructed by 2030. Although the official document says the site location has yet to be determined, Congresswoman Elise Stefanik has stated it will be at Fort Drum. It's been argued the Iron Dome in Israel is designed to target short-range ballistic missiles, not intercontinental ballistic missiles sent from China or Russia, for example. But one missile defense expert says the Iron Dome for America is more of a label, not a system.
Let's not think about it in terms of a specific system, but really sort of a metaphor for a desired level of capability against an increasingly wide spectrum of air and missile threats.
While it's unclear the executive order means anything to Fort Drum, a Washington source tells 7 News is potentially a huge breakthrough for Stefanik in East Coast missile defense at Fort Drum. Lexi Bruning, 7 News.